folks, and welcome to the Non-Diet Yogi podcast, where we explore yoga, earth-based living, and gentle nutrition through a non-diet lens. I'm your host, Casey Conroy, non-diet dietitian and yoga teacher, and this is episode 6, HAES Naturopathy. This is my interview with Chandrika Gibson, naturopath, yoga therapist and teacher trainer, cancer researcher, and PhD candidate. Now, in this episode, Chandrika and I covered so many juicy topics, and I was pretty much hanging off every word that Chandrika said. Some of the things we talk about are Chandrika's upbringing and her hippie trail to becoming a naturopath, teacher, and eventually cancer researcher, the co-opting of wellness to sell stuff and the accessibility issues this creates, the differences between health, wellness, and well-being, the problematic belief that living a so-called clean lifestyle guarantees you won't ever get sick, values-based living, healthism, and remembering that health is not a moral imperative, living with chronic illness and still having high-level wellness, the trouble with naturopaths, supporting rather than undermining the conventional medical system as a natural health practitioner, how qualified naturopaths can set themselves apart from underqualified people with questionable training, homeopathy, reiki, and meeting the client where they are at, navigating a client's desire to follow extreme diets for cancer, why a HAES-informed weight-neutral practice is old-school naturopathy in its best sense, yoga therapy and the koshas, finding truly body-inclusive and accessible yoga, Chandrika's research in head and neck cancer and her lived experience with skin cancer, and there is more. So this is really a very juicy, packed episode. Chandrika is a teacher in the truest sense of the word. She's extremely intelligent and she's currently completing her PhD in integrative oncology. But far from being a heady intellectual, she is all heart. Her words land really softly but powerfully. And for me, they were kind of silently explosive. Just speaking with Chandrika made me feel really calm, and also that I want to be a better practitioner. I wanted to be a better human just listening to her. For the Patreon subscribers to the podcast, when this episode is released, you'll have access to Chandrika's Yoga Nidra. And I've got to say, it's one of the most profoundly beautiful yoga nidras I've ever experienced. So I'm not sure when I first learnt about Chandrika, but for some time we've hung out in the same kind of inclusivity, non-diet natural medicine circles on Facebook. And I noticed this incredibly wise and humble woman making some pretty profound, head-turning comments on various Facebook forums. So when I finally checked her out, I was just delighted to realize that she was not only an accomplished naturopath and lecturer, but also a yoga teacher, a yoga therapist, and a non-diet health at every size advocate. I kind of just felt like, is this woman real? How can she be all of these amazing things? Chandrika, she's a voice of sanity in the natural medicine world, to me at least. She just has this really balanced, sane, inclusive approach to natural medicine that I personally find really refreshing. I feel like there's this huge need actually for non-diet and health at every size in natural medicine. And similarly, I sometimes feel that within the HAES world, there's kind of a bit of hesitation and maybe even suspicion surrounding natural therapies, which is understandable given how some facets of the CAM, the complementary and alternative medicine world, are quite enmeshed with diet culture, with privilege, with weight centricity, and with other forms of dodginess. But Chandrika bridges this gap, and she does it with grace, compassion, and a really strong science base, actually. So yeah, Chandrika, in my eyes, even though she doesn't call herself one, she is kind of the ultimate health at every size inclusive naturopath. And that's something that I personally would like people to realize, that not all non diet HAES practitioners are so called mainstream health practitioners. There are HAES and weight neutral naturopaths as well. And I would bet that there are also HAES acupuncturists and, you know, all kinds of natural therapist folks out there who are weight neutral, body inclusive, non diet, and health at every size advocates. So, yeah, I'd really like, I have this fantasy where, any non diet health practitioners who might be listening to this podcast and who also might be a bit wary of dodgy cam practitioners or anything resembling wellness wankery, I'd really like these folks to understand that not all naturopaths are weight centric, non evidence based charlatans, that evidence based complementary and integrative medicine, as Chandrika puts it, is a real thing, and it's increasingly prioritized during training at uni. So I'm currently completing my naturopathy degree, as you may already know, and I am finding that there is this stronger and stronger emphasis on evidence-based practice, which is really, it has its pros and cons, but I think that it is a way forward for sure. So, this conversation with Chandrika really got me thinking, and I think it's going to do the same for you. It got me thinking about how I can make my yoga classes more accessible and inclusive, how, when I eventually graduate as a naturopath, how I can support rather than undermine mainstream medical practice, and just generally how I and we all can know ourselves better so that we can do better. I'm still revisiting a lot of the things that she discussed here, and I really can't describe just how profound and powerful Chandrika's words are. When you listen to this episode, you will see what I mean. Before getting to the episode, a quick bio of Chandrika, which is a challenge because she's an extremely accomplished woman. Chandrika Gibson, ND, is a naturopath, yoga therapist, teacher trainer, cancer wellness coach, researcher, and educator. She's the owner of Surya Health, an innovative natural medicine business in Perth, where her team provides yoga classes, including inclusive yoga and meditation classes for all levels, as well as specialized therapeutic yoga for cancer survivors and their carers. Her team at Surya Health also provides naturopathic counseling and other health services for clients. She is also a yoga therapist teacher trainer at Wisdom Yoga Institute, which offers deeply transformative yoga therapist training courses for qualified yoga teachers to add knowledge and skills to work with different populations and individuals. With a strong interest in integrative oncology, Chandrika is currently undertaking research in improving the psychosocial education and support offered to people diagnosed with head and neck cancers. Now, this group have a particularly distressing experience due to the high visibility of the cancers and frequent disfigurement due to treatments. And Chandrika's interest is in self-image and how a mindfulness-based training can help reintegrate their sense of self when appearance and function of the senses changes. She has also lectured at Endeavour College of Natural Health. So I've just pulled a bunch of that stuff from her LinkedIn profile. There's actually so much more that I just cannot fit in here. But basically, Chandrika is amazing. And without further ado, here is my interview with Chandrika Gibson. Hi, Chandrika, and welcome to the Non-Diet Yogi podcast.
Hi, Casey. Thanks for having me.
Chandrika, I've been following you for some time, and I guess it's because you're something of a unicorn in the wellness world to me. You know, you're a yoga teacher and a yoga therapist, as well as a naturopath and an academic now who's completing your PhD. And you have this wonderfully kind of balanced, really refreshing take on the place of wellness, in particular yoga, in a conventional medical setting. And I just love the way that you bring all of that stuff together and harmonize it. I particularly love your approach to natural medicine, which just seems really sane and balanced and inclusive. And inclusivity in the wellness world is something I'd really love to see more of. So thank you for all of that.
Well, right back at you. I've been following you too, and I see this kind of freshness and energy and intellect shining through, as well as all the beautiful holistic stuff. And yeah, it's great. The more of it, the better.
Oh wow, that really means a lot coming from you. Thank you. Chandrika, would you mind giving the listeners a bit of a background about yourself? So, what led you to become a naturopath and a yoga therapist, and now a yoga therapist and yoga teacher trainer?
Okay, sure. I mean, it's a long and winding road, like most of the interesting lives are. In fact, last night I was teaching, I did a series of yoga fundamentals and philosophy classes, and I asked them, for any questions about the philosophical things we've been bringing up. And one lady said, well, I want to know how come you know this? Like, why did you go so deep into this? So maybe I'll start where I started with her, which was in my childhood. I grew up on a farm in country Western Australia. Was a beef farm, ironically enough, because by the time I was 16, I was a hardcore vegetarian. So I really loved the animals that I grew up around. And my parents used to say, we paid your school fees off the back of selling beef, so you should be more grateful for it, which I am, of course, grateful for it, and all the animals that gave their lives so I could get educated.
Yes.
Thanks, class. But it was kind of not as totally unusual upbringing for a farm kid, I guess. But what we had in our house was a lot of books. And I was just an obsessive, compulsive reader. I couldn't stop. I read everything. I still do, actually. I have to stop myself now that we have this incredible world of information. I have to stop myself from just reading everything and sometimes try to actually write something and contribute to the conversation. So one of the things I read when I was really quite young was a little Indian yoga book, and it had all the Ayurvedic ideas of scraping your tongue and drinking lemon water and massaging your joints with sesame oil. And so my brother, who was 6 years older, he and I did everything in the book, and I had this real affinity for the postures. I felt like, oh yeah, this feels fantastic, like I get it. I'd done a little bit of gymnastics, but I wasn't particularly good at any of that stuff. I just really liked yoga. So something about that stayed with me. And then when I was a teenager, I went on a student exchange to Canada, and that was where I kind of came in contact with, I guess, some people living a different kind of alternative lifestyle. I mean, growing up in the southwest of WA, I'd seen the surf kind of culture and that alternative lifestyle, but these were people who were really kind of off-grid living and musicians and artists and writers. And I just felt like something in me lit up. I was like, I know what I want. I know how I want my life to go. And then the winding road began to get back to that. So I'd kind of dropped out of life, society, university, and gone traveling with my partner, who is still my partner 25 years later. And we had our hippie van and our little dog, and we were camping out in the forests of New South Wales. And one day, and there may have been some marijuana involved along the way, one day I was just looking into the green of the forest, and I had this vision come to me of sitting in a classroom watching an Indian man drawing a set of kidneys on a whiteboard, and me just knowing that's where I'm meant to be.
Wow.
So from that, I said to my partner, I think we have to go back to Perth, and I think I want to study natural medicine, and I'll know it when I see it.
Wow.
And this was like the middle of the year. It wasn't the right time to start a new course or anything. I didn't know how I was going to pay for it or how it was going to happen. But he agreed and said, yep, sure, if you've got that calling, let's do it. So we came back to Western Australia, and I enrolled at Perth Academy of Natural Therapies. And it wasn't very long into that course that vision was right there.
Oh
And
my
that was
goodness.
Adil Vakil, who was a really important teacher for me.
Wow. That's
And
just
what he did was he actually got me up one day in that same anatomy and physiology class, and got me to teach some aspect. And it was again about the kidneys. It was about the renal system, which is by no means my expertise these days. But I got up and I drew something and I taught the class what I needed to teach them. And he was like, we have a teacher.
Whoa.
And again, I felt that like whole body shiver of recognition, like, yeah, that's something I really want to do. I want to share this with other people.
Oh my goodness. That is one hell of a story, Chandrika. Wow. Oh, that's incredible. That's incredible. And since that day when you were standing in front of the class and having that full body realization of, yeah, I think this is where it's at, you've become you've just done some incredible stuff. You're now such a pioneer in the wellness world, in the sense that, you know, you marry your passion for natural therapies with a very evidence-based approach, and you have this desire to really support and complement rather than undermine the work of health practitioners in other fields. And I just love that. I love that about you and the way that you approach this. So thank you for sharing that story. That was fascinating. But thinking now, I guess, about wellness. So, you know, you were called to study natural medicine, and there's this whole concept of wellness, which can be, I suppose, quite a nebulous and often maybe misunderstood term, at least in the circles I associate with. So I'm studying naturopathy, but up until recently was on the Gold Coast, on the eastern coast of Australia. And wellness is often kind of associated, at least here, with green juices and sleek muscled yoga bodies. And there was an article that you wrote for Medium titled Body Positive Yoga that I thought it was just such a beautifully and honestly written piece. And something that really stood out to me was the way that you described the differences between health and wellness. Do you think you could speak a little bit about your interpretation of wellness and how it differs from health? Because I thought that was very interesting.
Yes, I'll try. So it is nuanced and sometimes gets a bit pedantic about the meanings of the words, but I do think this idea of wellness has been kind of co-opted to sell stuff, and that's never been really the intention that I've understood. In fact, my interpretation of wellness is needing less from your environment, not needing to buy anything in order to really tap into what feels like you're going in the right direction internally for yourself. So really, to me, wellness is about the direction you're facing, and that can be reflected in behaviors, but those behaviors start with values. So it's not that you shouldn't drink the green juice or go and do your yoga on the beach or go on retreat or do all those lovely things you can buy. You can do those things if you happen to have the privilege to be able to do them, but anyone should be able to access well-being. And maybe well-being is better than wellness because of where wellness has gone. Like in the academic literature, there's more about well-being. And so when I'm kind of writing for that audience, I say well-being and not wellness, because wellness raises a little red flag that says, oh no, we've got the Gwyneth Paltrow, Mel Gibson, you know, we've got the problems coming up.
I'm just trying not to laugh constantly into the microphone. Yeah, you're so
But the other
right.
thing is, I think that health is given this, I don't know, some almost like a moral value, like if you're healthy, you're a better human being than someone who's not healthy. And I think that's really fucked up, because the people that I work with mostly are people who have cancer. And let me tell you, they fall for that stuff so easily because they think it must be my fault, must be something that I did. Maybe I smoked cigarettes when I was a teenager. Maybe I drank too much alcohol when I was young. But it's not their fault, no matter what they did in terms of lifestyle. And, you know, nobody has a perfect lifestyle. And even if you do, that's no guarantee that you're not going to get a serious illness one day.
Yep.
Bodies are not built forever. These bodies are going to break down eventually. And if you're not prepared for that, if you think that you've got this insurance policy because of your brilliant, clean lifestyle, I hate that word as well, because that implies that everything else is dirty. And I say, well, then get dirty, get down in the dirt and mud and enjoy it, because that's what life's about.
Oh God, yes.
And make sure you wash your vegetables really well, because they're dirty by nature.
They're very dirty.
So I think it's really problematic that, and it's easy to have that privilege. And I think I did when I was a young naturopath as well. I can remember going into those lecture theatres, and there was a couple of students who brought in cans of Coke and bags of twisties. And I was really dogmatic, like, no, 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 that's not what we do. Oh my goodness. At least not when you're on show. You don't do that.
When you're on display to everyone, when you're
But
performing.
now I think good on them for just being themselves and not being ashamed to do what made them feel good in the moment. It's, might not be the healthiest choice long term, but there's no brownie points given for eating this perfect diet and, waking up at 4 a.m. and doing an hour and a half of yoga. Nobody's going to give you a prize for that. You do it for yourself if it matters to you. So if that's what you value, then your behaviors should reflect your values and you'll be living in alignment with what really matters to you. Great, go and do all those things. But not everybody cares that much about that.
Yes.
At the moment I'm trying to write a chapter for a book, which is really exciting. So this morning I did less yoga because I knew I don't want to put all my energy out there. I need to sit at my desk and actually pull some deep energy out to write.
Yes.
So what I value today is something different. And that should be okay for everyone to say, actually, I don't care how fat I am. I don't care what my skin condition is. I don't care if I haven't got sleek, shiny hair and look great on Instagram. That's not what matters to me. I'm looking after my children, or I'm looking after my aging parents. I'm looking after me in a way that isn't anybody else's business.
Oh, yes. Hallelujah to all of that. So, yeah, if I'm hearing you right, you're talking about values-based living, and those, health isn't necessarily a value for everyone. And I think it does rattle me, and it sounds like it does you too, when you come across in this kind of health and wellness world, when we come across healthism and this kind of this belief or this concept of pursuing health as a moral imperative or like an individual obligation, where really health status should never be used to judge or oppress how or someone's value. It's not that at all. It shouldn't be about that.
No, and if we do have a public health issue, then that's a collective issue rather than an individual's fault. And so I think that where it really breaks down for me is when I'm working one-on-one with people who have had a cancer diagnosis, that they blame themselves for the choices that they're making. And I find myself quite often trying to explain to them, well, no, this is genetics and environment combining. And the environment that we're living in, most people in modern societies are living in a pretty toxic food environment. The air may not be clean, the water may not be clean. So anything that's triggered off this genetic tendency that you've inherited thanks to all the other wonderful genes you've inherited as well, it's not your fault. And when you take away that blame, I mean, that makes them cry. When I say it's not your fault that you got this disease, a lot of people break down and go, oh, I was holding so much, blame for myself or blame for my parents or blame for whoever, whatever the workplace that I was in that stressed me out. And maybe it was my stress that caused my cancer. Well, maybe it was, but when you hit that point of getting the diagnosis, there's really nothing constructive about rehashing the past.
That's it.
And you need to then decide, well, how do I want to live with this illness? And that brings me back to that concept of wellness. You may not be able to cure the health condition or get rid of it or put it in remission. Maybe you will, and that's great if you do. But if you don't, you want to be able to live as well as possible with that health condition. And that applies to all the chronic illnesses. And, that's going to affect 1 out of 2, all of us, basically. It'll be us or it'll be the person closest to us. We'll have a chronic illness if we live long enough. So we're going to have to come to grips with that you're not a lesser person because you've got osteoarthritis. You're not a lesser person because you've got eczema. You are you, and you've got all these wonderful components to you. You're not your disease, and you can be well. You can be well on all the dimensions of wellness that are available to you, that matter to you, whether that's about your spirituality, about your mental health, about your connection with other people, your connection with nature, might be about your animals, might be about your creativity, might be just the basics of life, like you're a functioning adult. That's winning.
Yes. I agree wholeheartedly. Hey, you're able to function in this world. Well done. You know,
Yeah.
that's an accomplishment, regardless of what health issues you've got going on. If you're able to, as you said, live in a way that is as best as you can do, you know, that's fantastic. You don't have to be this 100% shiny, gleaming model of health to be well. I love that.
Mhm. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, and
Thank
it
you.
is the direction that you're facing. You know, it's there's that model. I think the person who created it was Jack Travis. He's a lovely kind of off the grid, off the planet academic as well.
Cool.
So he was one of my lecturers when I did my Masters of Wellness through RMIT, and he was Skyping in from his caravan in Mullumbimby or somewhere. So he was a pretty cool guy, and he created this model of wellness that has a person in a wheelchair wheeling themselves towards high level wellness and a fit, youthful looking person running, but facing towards, you know, premature death. And
Yes.
it's just a visual reminder. It's a fairly simplistic model, but it's a visual reminder that you can't tell by looking how healthy somebody is. And you don't know whether their behaviors are driven by a movement towards high level wellness, or maybe their behaviors are actually driven because they hate themselves and they're punishing themselves, or, you know, maybe it's a numbing mechanism. So, yeah,
Absolutely.
we can't tell by
Absolutely.
looking.
No, and we certainly can't tell someone's, you know, mental health by looking at the outside. Gosh, that's a really powerful image. That's going to stick with me. Yeah, that's fantastic, and it's kind of completely counter to this our current diet culture where what someone looks like is meant to, or we're told it tells us everything about someone's
Mhm.
health and well-being, including how happy and successful they are.
Mhm.
Just a whole other thing. But yeah, thank you for sharing that insight. Chandrika, another incredible article that you wrote again on Medium, and my personal favorite is called "The Trouble with Naturopaths," and in which is just such a kick-ass title, by the way. As soon as I saw that title, I was like, oh shit, yeah, I gotta read that. I gotta read that. And in it, you describe a few things, but you describe your version of these 6 principles of naturopathic philosophy. So that's something that we learn in our naturopathy studies kind of ad nauseum. But your take on the principles was so, again, refreshing and pragmatic, you know, just so you basically. So could you please chat a little bit about that article and maybe touch on a few of the 6 principles of naturopathic philosophy as you see them? Maybe with a nod to some of the more kind of controversial issues in naturopathy, such as, you know, and I know you'll probably have stuff to say about this, but the use of black salve, or the use of fad diets in cancer treatment, or even, you know, you talk about the complete avoidance of chemicals in air quotes in kind of these wellness so there's a lot there,
Yes.
but do you think you could chat
We'd
a
really have to transcend. We'd have to transcend this planet if we wanted to be free of chemicals, wouldn't we? And even out in space, there must be some. I don't even know what
yeah,
space is made of, but
we need to transcend several dimensions, I think, to get away from chemicals.
yeah. So I really do love naturopathy, and I'm not sorry that I studied it. And it really fit what I was looking for originally, which was to understand both the mental and emotional and spiritual and the physical aspects of health and well-being is what I'm passionate about. But when I first started to kind of shift into working in more mainstream settings, because I was pretty out there for a long time, and then I needed to get a grown-up job at a certain point, like most people do, somewhere along the line you realize, it's actually quite hard, this hustle of trying to get clients, and it's not very secure. And plus I wanted to serve more people with cancer, and I didn't want them to have to pay out of their own pockets. So I was very fortunate to get some work with a cancer charity. And in that setting, my direct line manager was very clear: don't talk about it. Pretend you're not a naturopath. Hide the naturopath under your hat. I felt like the cat in the hat, you know, with something tucked in underneath there. And every now and then I'd give a presentation to the patients and I'd say something. I can remember one talk I gave about stress, and it was supposed to be about stress and mindfulness, but I'd brought in the vagus nerve. And one gentleman in the audience said, well, you're clearly not just a meditation teacher, you know stuff. And I was like, well, yeah, I do, but I'm hiding it under my hat.
Uh-oh.
And so I had learned, and I'd learned that earlier as well, because what got me into working with cancer was that my own dad passed away from lung cancer. And, you know, I was naive, and it was the 90s. We had the internet, but we didn't really use it in the same way. My generation, we're the shift. We're the ones who remember life before it. We had to go to the library to look things up.
What? There was life before the internet?
So when he was diagnosed, I came home from college, you know, I'd bought out the dispensary of all these supplements and antioxidant type things and whatever. And he took them to his oncologist, who I now work closely with.
Wow.
And the oncologist said, well, you can't take that. You shouldn't take that. I wouldn't recommend that. And left him with, you know, magnesium or something. And I was devastated. You know, I was like, I'm just trying to help, and I'm getting knocked back. It was a big wake-up call, though, to understand that if I really wanted to help someone who also needed the conventional system's help, I was going to have to get on board with them in a certain way and learn what the problems were, learn what the issues were, so that I could find those workarounds. And one of the beauties of yoga and meditation is that there's not much objection to those things. They have a really strong evidence base, a growing evidence base, and they're not biologically active in the same way that herbs and supplements are. So there's a lot less objection to them. So that became kind of my niche in the cancer charities. But all the time I just kept learning about, all right, so what is the problem then with antioxidants and cancer? And so I'd find these research articles, and sometimes, you know, mainstream medicine is not that evidence-based either. It's not. It's one article came out in the 80s showing that people with, I think it was a small cell lung cancer, did worse when they had vitamin A combined with their treatments. And since then, all oncologists have said a blanket no to antioxidants. Now it's changing. It is changing because there's a lot more openness and dialogue going on, and it's mostly patient-led. I'm calling them patients, even though in natural therapies we call them clients, but I'm in that mainstream world now, so that's what rolls off my tongue more easily. They're not my patients. They might be my clients. They might be my colleagues and friends, but then somebody's patients at a certain point.
Gotcha.
So the patients drive that. They go to their oncologists with printouts of proper research articles and say, well, you said no to this, but look, in this study, and it was the same kind of cancer I've got, 50% of people did better when they took that. So I want to try it. And the oncologists then get educated by their patients and go, yeah, okay, I can't really argue with that. That's fact-based stuff. You can try it, and we'll keep an eye on it, and we'll take measures of these different levels and go for it. So there's a lot more dialogue happening, and I do feel really privileged to be in those settings and to sometimes let the naturopath out of the bag and say, hey, but what about this? You know?
Yes. And I think people like you who are taking that really evidence-based approach with your naturopathy are forging the way for others, you know, other naturopaths to do the same, and to hopefully you know, clamber to that incredible position you're now in, where these other kind of mainstream health practitioners do listen to what you have to say, because you are you know, on the same field. You're speaking their language, and I think that's it's a blessing for, you know, the clients, the patients, obviously, but it also really helps give student naturopaths like myself some hope that, you know what, I think there is hope for us moving forward, that we will be valuable, we will be able to help people in an integrated setting where there's multi practitioners. Yeah, I love to hear you talk about that, because I think others do too, other student naturopaths. So maybe on that note, could you talk a little bit about the hope that you have for naturopathy moving forward, and specifically, and maybe this is just for me, but other people I'm sure would like to hear this too, how we can set ourselves apart from the shiny haired, yeah, I'm going to be a bit cynical here, shiny haired kind of 18-year-old health coaches and the wellness influencers
who might have very minimal or even no online training or any kind of training? How can we gain traction in the way that you have, and build trust within the conventional medical setting so that we can better serve our clients?
Yeah, I think it's a really important question to be asking. I think you can choose. As a naturopath, you can choose which end of the continuum of natural medicine you feel most comfortable in. And if you really do love your homeopathy, or you love, more energetic type practices, and you want to never hide them under your hat,
Mm-hmm.
that is absolutely fine, because there will be an appetite for that from the public. You market yourself and you tell the story of what you love to do, and people will find you and come to you. But if what you really want to do is integrate yourself with conventional healthcare practitioners and have really good cross referral and good communication, and what I picture in my mind is kind of really putting the client, I'll call them clients, in the center. It's client-centered practice. They're the most important thing. And if you can really prioritize them and not your own bottom line,
Mm-hmm.
then you won't be tempted to sell supplements that don't have any evidence. Then you won't be tempted to keep them coming back for packages and programs that actually they could do for free,
Mm-hmm.
that they don't need. I mean, I'm not wanting to disparage. Some naturopaths do that really well, and we have to continue to have the value placed on the therapeutic relationship as well, which is something naturopaths do really well, because we spend more time, we listen more deeply. We should probably do more of that and less of the advice giving. And then we kind of start to move closer to a counselling type model. So we don't want to tread on the toes of the psychologists and the counsellors and the social workers either. So we need to then differentiate ourselves. And I think the point of difference is we really know about complementary therapies, and they don't necessarily. So I get referrals from psychologists, for example, who know that nutrition has a big impact on people's mental well-being, and they know that mindfulness is really important. They know that yoga and movement-based practices are really important, but they either don't have the skills or don't have the time in the way that the model of their caregiving is set up to deliver that themselves. So if they know that they can send their clients to someone who won't undermine what they're doing, who won't tell them to come off their medication, who won't tell them that chemotherapy is poison, or put them on a radical extreme elimination diet that nearly starves them to death, triggering their eating disorders and whatever else. If they know that you won't do that, then you build trust. And that comes from personal interactions, that comes from what you put out on the internet, it comes from every way that they can see you and contact you. So you have to have integrity. You have to be really clear, this is who I am and this is what I stand for, and this is what I will give to the people who come to me in practice. And then don't deviate from that. Because if you go, oh, well, in this setting, I'm going to be the wacky woo, and in this setting, I'm going to be the serious citing the evidence, that's really confusing. And when the serious citing the evidence people see you giving out wacky woo stuff, they'll just completely lose trust in you, because there is still a real barrier to acceptance of some things that naturopaths do.
Yes. Oh wow, you just said so much there. And I think when you said, if we were to do that, to put ourselves out there as evidence-based, complementary integrative medicine practitioners, people, and then do something counter to that, not only do we lose the trust, not only do people lose trust in us, but it seems it's really easy for these other practitioners to lose trust in alternative practitioners in general. And to, I do really want listeners, and especially kind of the anti-natural therapies practitioners, and especially the non-diet anti-natural therapies practitioners, it's so easy, as you say, to paint all kind of holistic wellness practitioners with the wellness wankery kind of paintbrush. And what I love about you, I've said a few times, is that not all naturopaths are non-evidence-based charlatans, right? And you were also talking about the fact that we're in this position where we are the CAM experts, but we also get more time with the client. We also can take on more of a counselling style whilst not stepping on the toes of counselors and psychotherapists and psychologists. But we have this beautiful opportunity to bring these things together and to really center ourselves as a unique kind of practitioner, as long as I think we can remain in integrity and be really clear about which side of that spectrum, as you said, that we sit on. So yeah, thank you for explaining that.
And I will backtrack a little bit on that and say that, you know, what the client cares about is also part of evidence-based practice. So meeting them where they are at and what they value is also being an evidence-based practitioner. So maybe I shouldn't have said, you know, never prescribe homeopathy or never do reiki on them or whatever. If that's what they want, I think so long as your communication is clear. And, you know, I did this recently in a birthing workshop that I co-facilitated. We're talking about arnica, and I said, look, there's scanty to no evidence that this helps, but it does work as a placebo, and there's nothing wrong with that. So if you're going to feel better by taking it, absolutely take it. It won't do you any harm.
Yes.
And so I think that message can be there as well, that yes, you know, we don't really know. We can't measure with scientific instruments what it is that's working with homeopathy or reiki or things that are energetic like that. That doesn't mean there's nothing happening though.
Yes.
There is something happening in the trust between practitioner and client. In, you know, I've walked into rooms where reiki has just been happening and wow, like there's an emanating stillness and peace here. That is powerful medicine, even if it can't be measured. So please don't misunderstand me and think that I'll only do something if there's, you know, 17 peer-reviewed articles on it.
Yes.
That's not quite true. But I think you do have to choose which way do I lean and what is my message to the community about what I can offer them.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Just remembering that client-centered, you know, focus, and remembering it's about them at the end of the day and what's going to help them. As you said, you know, you can state, here's something, here's all the evidence supporting it, or here's no evidence supporting it, but what's going to help you? Let's go there. Thank you.
And that really speaks to the dietary stuff as well. So, you know, thinking about, I'm not interested in extreme diets because I don't think they work very well. But I have seen people with cancer who find that that is the kind of locus of control that they can grasp when so much else is out of their control in the cancer experience. And so I don't stop them. If they're my one-on-one client and they're saying, I'm doing this, you know, vegan juicing, whatever, it's fairly extreme thing, I won't stop them. I'll just ask them, you know, so how are you feeling? Is it working for you? Is it taking up a lot of time in your day? You know, if they're chained to the kitchen bench juicing thousands of vegetables a day, they're not living all the other parts of their life that matter. If their disease is terminal, they probably want to see their family and friends. They don't want to be chained to the kitchen bench. So it's completely up to them, but I will probe a little bit and say, so why? What's working about it? What's not working about it? And have you considered that it might be a little bit too low protein, given that you had surgery not so long ago and you probably need to be, you know, repairing some tissues? You might want to add some nuts, or you might want to add, you know, you can have one dish with protein in it each day and you can still stick to the rest of it or whatever. So so there's some middle ground there, because yes, this is the other part that we have a real strength in. People that have really bought into that wellness mindset and that natural medicine mindset, they feel alienated in the conventional system. So they feel shut down when they raise the question. And we should be the people, I believe, who are open to the questions, who can take the time to discuss the nuances, the pros and cons of things, to figure out, well, is it working? Do you like it? Keep it then. But, you know, no harm, no foul. If you're happy with it and you're the person that this is happening to, who am I to stop you? Rather than that more kind of, I was going to say patriarchal, but it's paternalistic, both. That kind of authoritarian style of medicine that unfortunately there are still some old school doctors practicing. The younger ones don't do this in the same way, but some of the older ones do still say, nope, it's rubbish, forget about it. Because we've got 5 minutes and I need to tell you about the side effects of your radiation therapy.
Yes, and that paternalistic kind of flavor can occur not only in, you know, in an oncologist's office, but with naturopaths as well. I've come across older naturopaths or even lecturers. You know, one guy said to me, he said, your clients should think that you don't fart. That's how high up they should see you. And I was like, are you serious, dude? Really? So yeah, I really love what you're saying about not just the client-centered focus, but also, you know, not being afraid to probe and to ask those questions and to get them into their bodies and to get them really thinking and feeling, is this working for me? Is this, do I feel in alignment with this choice right now? And if so, great. And if not, do I have permission to offer some information to you that may help you to make the next choice? So I love that.
And usually they're so jolly hungry that they're like, really? Really? I could have an egg? Oh my God. No. Yeah, you could.
So they're super eager to kind of listen to what you have to say anyway. They're ready. They're ready. So yeah, kind of just talking about naturopathy a little bit more, and then we're going to change gears. But going back to that article that the trouble with naturopaths, some of the principles that you discussed in that article, such as, first do no harm, treat the whole person, these are these naturopathic principles. Correct me if I'm wrong, maybe I'm just fantasizing here, but they seem very much aligned with kind of the health at every size and body acceptance approaches in many ways. And that makes me think, that despite there being some weight bias in naturopathy, as there is in every health field, that weight neutral approaches like HAES actually can fit quite nicely with the naturopathic approach. Do you think there's some space for non-diet approaches and HAES within naturopathy?
Definitely. I think that's where we started from.
Yay.
That's old school naturopathy in its best sense.
Thank you
we
for
see
confirming
people
that.
as not just their physicality, but their whole selves, and we are there to nurture and nourish their whole selves without bigotry, without exclusion. It's about the individual though, and so this is a problem because every one of us is influenced by mainstream culture, whether we like it or not. I was at a conference a couple of months ago in Adelaide, and they showed a picture of Harry and Meghan, and everybody laughed, and they said, when it comes to science communication, this is what we're up against. Because all of you might think you don't read that garbage, you don't read the tabloids, but you know exactly what's going on with Harry and Meghan, don't you?
Yeah.
And so that's the same for individual practitioners. They might think, I accept people as they are, but they're still influenced subconsciously or consciously by diet culture, by, Adele's weight loss being in the media. They see it and they take it on board on a certain level, whether they mean to and want to or not. And then they can't help but think when they're face to face with someone, you'd be so much happier if you were just thinner, or you'd be, it's not intentional. I don't believe that most naturopaths are consciously bigoted against bigger people, but I think that they read too much into this idea that all your health problems would be solved if only you could lose weight. And that's where they're missing that important bit of information, which is that weight loss, first of all, doesn't necessarily equate to better health, and also it's almost impossible for most people. 95% of efforts to lose body fat are going to fail. They won't work long term. So why are you butting your head up against that when this person isn't telling you that anyway? Most people are not coming into the clinic saying, my goal is to lose this much weight. Most of them are saying, I'm not sleeping well, or my hormones seem out of whack, or I've got pain, or I've got whatever's going on, digestive issues. So weight loss could be a side effect of tweaking their lifestyle and helping them find, ways to move that make them happy and all of that. It could be, but I don't think it was ever meant to be the goal in a naturopathic consultation.
Yeah, I agree. And I just want to touch on when you said, weight loss could happen as a side effect. Yeah, it could. And there's nothing wrong with that. We're not against weight loss per se, but the focus on weight loss, possibly at the expense of focusing on actual health. This is where things can go wrong. And I really, I guess I'll try to be a bit careful about what I say here, but I've been to some nutraceutical company seminars and seen, them lay out whole protocols of supplements that's, for a weight loss approach. And on top of that, I've encountered, more than enough weight bias and accessibility issues within kind of both the natural medicine and yoga world. And it's, as you said, it is insidious. It's everywhere. It's not just in naturopathy. It's not just in these kind of wellness centers. It's everywhere. It's in our politics. It's in our medical system at large. And I guess though, zooming back on naturopathy, I think that, and this is, again, it's everywhere, but I think that, at least for me so far in my experiences at uni, I have encountered a bit of victim blaming and this kind of lack of understanding of privilege, and how that affects people's ability to access and practice even some of the naturopathic suggestions that we have, some of the philosophies that underpin it. And, there's this definite fat phobia and weight bias there. So I'm so relieved and excited to hear you say that actually, no, these principles, do no harm, and they are beautifully aligned with health at every size, because I just want non-diet inclusive approaches to just fall in love with natural medicine and have babies together. That's what I would really like to see. So thank you
I think you're
for giving
right.
me hope.
I think it is a really good fit. And I'm starting to see this term HAES Naturopath being used more widely as well.
Really?
And I think if anyone wants to kind of confirm that in their branding, that is a really important thing, to put that message out into the world, because people are looking for it. I'm on lots of kind of body positivity groups and pages, and people are searching for that. They're saying, who can I go and talk to about my health that won't body shame me first up? If I go to the doctor and they can't fit the blood pressure cuff around my arm, I'm going to be humiliated, and I'm not going to go back no matter how good a doctor they are. So they want to see people who get that, and who will love them and care for them and look after them, and not make them feel rubbish about themselves, because shame undermines anything else that you might be trying to do. It demotivates people. They won't go out and exercise in public if they feel like they're going to be mocked. And we started before we were recording to talk about The Biggest Loser. That's a really problematic show in so many ways, not least because anyone who's carrying a bit of weight who goes to the gym now, people are going to be eyeballing them, because they've been made a mockery of. They've been made this commodity and made to feel like they're lesser humans because they're bigger humans. And I say, fuck that. Take up as much space as you want. Show the parts of your body that you feel comfortable to show, and live your best life. Forget about it. Genetics you can't control a lot of. And, we live in this toxic food environment anyway. And I think about what a privilege it is. So for me at the moment, writing a PhD, I'm at home a lot. I can go to the shop every day if I want to and buy fresh food. I don't have to think in the afternoons when everybody's coming home from work, oh my goodness, what am I going to do for dinner? Because I've been here all day. So if I want to soak lentils, I can soak lentils. But that is the privilege of not being in, a basic job where I have to be out away from my home all day, which is most people, right? Let's be honest about the cost of living in Australia. Most people have to work in some form. And so they are out. And then if you have to pick children up from daycare and you're coming home and everybody's tired and you haven't prepped anything, because whose job is it? Well, it's everybody's, but it usually falls on the woman in the household.
Yep.
So, of course, then you drive past 50 drive-throughs that say you can get dinner for $5. What are you going to do? That is not the individual's fault. That is just being pragmatic and going, I'll get the kids some chips and corn and that'll do for dinner tonight, because that's life. Life is stressful and busy. And unless you are comfortably enough off to be growing your own food and buying fresh things and spending time preparing, and that only happens if you value that as well. So it might not be your priority in life. I'm going to get this article done today and order a fucking pizza tonight, because that's good for me and my family.
That sounds delicious. And you know what? It's going to be delicious and you're going to get the job done and it's going to fill your tummy, and that's enough. Oh, yes. Yeah. Thank you for saying that. It reminds me of this one time in naturopathy school where I had a lecturer saying that, people who eat McDonald's just need to learn more about nutrition and just stop feeding crap to their kids. And there was no acknowledgement of privilege or accessibility issues. And I think sometimes when that stuff is said, I do bite my tongue, but I think that time I did pipe up. So yeah, thank you for acknowledging that, because I think that it can be very easy to victim blame, and that's coming from a place of privilege. And it's something that, as practitioners of whatever field, whether it's naturopaths or doctors or dietitians, we need to be aware of. We need to check our own privilege. Yeah. Okay, so changing gears a bit now, Chandrika, towards yoga, because
Okay.
let's talk about yoga a bit. In my work as a dietitian, there's only so much we can do with nutrition. I'm sure you've maybe encountered that in your work as well. And I often think, geez, this person would really benefit from just some deep abdominal breathing, or maybe even some more specific asana or pranayama that honors their health issues and supports them in just improving their quality of life, not aiming to cure or heal necessarily, but just to improve their day-to-day living. And as a nutritionist and yoga teacher, I'm interested in how yoga can influence interoception and health behaviors in our students and our clients. Do you think you could talk a little bit about that?
Yes. I mean, I do sometimes fall into the category of thinking that yoga is almost a cure-all. It's something that everybody needs in some form, and it doesn't have to be classical hatha yoga or any particular discipline of yoga. But I think our bodies are made to move, and the mind-body connection is undeniable. It's only been the last couple of hundred years or few hundred years of modern medicine that Cartesian split has put physical activity in one category. You go and see your physio for that, and mental well-being in another, and you go and see a psych for that. What we have in yoga, in a similar way to what we have in naturopathy, is a space that's available that is mind-body medicine, and we can work with people both top down, so talking and cognitive function and meditation, and bottom up through their body, through mindful movement, through deep breathing. If you tell your nervous system, I'm safe, by taking those deep diaphragmatic breaths, then you have a space open up to make other decisions. So that shifts that from that stressed out, hyper-driven, hyper-stimulated, have to stop at the takeaway because there's not really another pragmatic option. That is where we can make a shift, is managing the stress levels, managing that mind-body connection, bringing down the cortisol levels, letting people breathe and contemplate for a moment. I mean, that's a privilege that doesn't cost too much.
Yeah.
That is something that if we can shift from survival mode into reflective mode regularly, so it becomes a default place, then you can consider, well, what do I want to feed this body that I treasure, this body that is carrying me through my life, helping me do all the things that matter to me. I want to feel comfortable in it, and that's that interoception. That's from the inside out, rather than I want to fit into this size dress or weigh this on the scales or look at this in the mirror. It doesn't matter what it looks like in the mirror. It matters how it feels living in the body from the inside. So when you get people in touch with that, even for a few moments, something does change for them, and they do start to make decisions that reflect what they really want, what really makes them feel well. And it doesn't mean that any one particular dietary approach will be right. I know in yoga we have a lot of dogmatism about vegetarianism and plant-based diets, and I am a lifelong vegetarian, well, not lifelong, from teenage years on vegetarian, so I do subscribe to that myself. But I also recognize that if people can tap in and feel what's going on for themselves, they may choose to have an animal-based meal because that actually nourishes them for that time and place that they're in. So yeah, I think it's powerful stuff to allow people to get in touch with how they really feel. We all kind of live cut off at the neck.
Yes. So what I'm hearing you talk about is helping people to, or giving them the tools perhaps to take a pause, to create some space, because I think that's what a lot of people, including myself at times, are missing, is just remembering, hey, I can just take a breath and remember I have options here. I have options.
Yes.
Sometimes there's fewer options than at other times, but creating that space and feeling into your body can open that up for someone. And that, I suppose, brings me to this topic, which I know you're very passionate about, and I'm so interested to hear about at the moment, of yoga therapy. And I'm personally quite captivated by yoga therapy's potential to dive deeper than a yoga class can, and to really help people with deeper seated issues, which include mental health issues such as eating disorders, but also, chronic illness, whether it's mental, physical, or otherwise. So Chandrika, could you tell us a little bit about yoga therapy, what it is, who it's for, and why there's a need for it?
Yes, okay. Well,
Big
what
question.
it is still, yeah, it's a big question. It's still kind of evolving in that we've got some professional bodies that are taking a kind of leadership role and trying to define it. And the scope of practice has been defined by some of these professional bodies, but it really is kind of an emerging complementary therapy that is still up for debate a little bit about what really happens in a yoga therapy session. A lot like naturopathy, I think that we're going to come out with a spectrum of yoga therapists, some that are very kind of into biomechanics and are looking at load on tissues and are looking at your alignment in the poses. But most of the yoga therapists that I'm working with and training, they have a bit of interest in that. They certainly want to look after people's joints and muscles, but then they've also got this holistic, the kosher model of the layers of the human being. So there's the Annamaya kosher, this physical body, which is made from the food we eat and the genetics we inherited. And there's the energetic body, and there's the mental body, and there's the subtle, more spiritual aspects of that mental body. And then there's the bliss body. And I find this to be kind of the core of yoga therapy is, can we return home to really feeling one with everything? It's a very cosmic kind of idea, but we are so interconnected. And I think recently with the fires and climate change discussion, people are getting more conscious again, like we did in the 60s and 70s maybe, and for me in the 90s. It's like, yeah, we're connected with everything. So yoga can work on every level of your being, and it's not just a physical practice, and it's not even just a mindfulness practice. It can be targeted and individualized, and within that targeted individualized practice there can be this relationship with someone that you trust. And having a relationship with someone that you trust, that's where the magic happens. That's really healing for people. People are quite lonely despite our massive interconnection through the internet. People are really quite lonely. And this is what I see when people come for one-on-one yoga therapy. They want to talk and be heard and seen and understood. And so it's half talk therapy and half movement therapy. And people go home with a practice. So I think it's very empowering therapy. And then they can do it for themselves. These are not complicated sequences or, elaborate skills that require months and months to learn. They can learn it in a couple of sessions and go home and keep that practice going so that yoga becomes their space, their thing that they do for themselves.
Oh, that's really beautiful. And I love how you say that these are skills and tools that people can learn in a couple of sessions and then take home. That sounds really empowering to people. They're not having to necessarily rely on you to see you every week, week or month or whatever for years and years to benefit from yoga. You're talking about giving them a couple of tools to then go home and explore in their own territory. And I think that is really powerful for people. And yeah, also it makes it more accessible for people as well. And speaking about accessibility, just briefly again, I really, and talking about your article, the Body Positive Yoga article, which for people listening, if you have not read, I will be providing links for all of Chandrika's articles in the show notes because you've got to check her stuff out. But in terms of making yoga accessible to people in a wide range of bodies, what would you say to folks who want to try yoga for the first time but are thinking, gosh, I need to lose some weight before I try yoga? We spoke a little bit about this earlier. What would you say to those people?
Well, I think that you need to shop around and find the place that is truly inclusive. As with everything in our wellness world, the marketing has gone into overdrive, and I think people are calling things accessible and inclusive, but they may not necessarily be. So you need to dig beneath the surface, find out who the teacher is, what their training is, what their background is, what their philosophy and perspective is. And in my experience, the smaller studios tend to do this better than the big all-comers studios, although that said, you can get some really great teachers in the bigger settings as well. But you need to figure that out. You need to ask the questions or maybe go and try, but just be mindful that certain styles of yoga they have a bit of thin privilege built into them. Like most fast flow vinyasa classes, we'll ask you to twist and bind and do things that if you have short stumpy arms or a big round belly, that's not going to be accessible. And they won't have time in a fast flowing class to come around and give you adjustments or props or help you put a belt here or a block there. Usually that isn't practical and doesn't happen. There are exceptions. There are some gifted teachers who can do a fast flow with lots of people and still get to the people who need support. But that's a rarity. That takes a lot of experience. So mostly what you're getting in the kind of big box yoga is that kind of class. But what you could look for is the more slow classes. So yin, although it's not always comfortable and easy, has a lot more time available. So you can wriggle around and adjust and get another bolster or another block and make it work for your body. And teachers equally have a lot more time in those settings then to say, is that working? Can I help you? Let me try this. So a yin style class or a restorative style class, which is similar in its slowness, but more about getting comfortable and less about getting a deep stretch, those can be really good starting points. Or you can look for a class that does call itself therapeutic, accessible, inclusive. There's even fat yoga classes around. And if you're comfortable with that terminology, which I think you should be, it's fine. It's a neutral term, actually. It's just a adipose tissue. It's what we all have. If you want to go to a fat yoga class, then you know that you'll be, not surrounded by people that don't look so very different from you. And I think that's important too. People need to see it to be it. They need to know that it is possible in a different or diverse body type. And that's part of the problem with our social media and yoga, isn't it? That, people looking really fancy and slender and doing advanced contortionate postures get a lot of likes and a lot of traction. And it does look cool. Like, let's not beat around the bush about it. It looks beautiful. It's like a dance form. It's gorgeous. But that's not what most yoga classes are actually like. Most yoga classes, there is a mix, and it's not as hard as it might look. It's still hard. Yoga is not as easy as it looks either. So I had these beginners last night who were, shaking in their downward dog. I'm like, you can take rest, you can come down onto your knees. And coming down onto your knees isn't always comfortable for every body type either. So you need options. And you need a teacher that is willing to be with you with none of that shamey talk, because that is a problem in yoga classes. It's a lot of talk from the teacher. You get to find out where that teacher's coming from pretty quickly. So they'll drop things in about, burning off your Christmas pudding or whatever. And as soon as you hear that, or as soon as I hear that, I go, no, you're not for me.
Yeah. I've been there and I've heard that, and I've had clients in class at the same time who've had active eating disorders, and teachers are talking about skipping at least one meal a day, and I've been like, oh, this is such a shame. Why? You're such a great teacher. So yeah, Chandrika, I would like to just read a little bit from your article, Body Positive Yoga, because there's something you say here that I think just beautifully wraps up everything that we've been talking about in the last 10 or so minutes. You say, yoga is exercise that encourages mindfulness, self-care, and introspection. It allows practitioners over time to get to know their own habits of mind and body intimately, to observe the changes life brings through seasons and stages of life. This internal focus is part of what sets yoga apart from the world of wellness and body-focused fitspiration. Those words are so soothing to everyone, but particularly to people, I'm guessing, who feel not good enough to attend a yoga class. It just really gets to the heart of what yoga is actually about. So thank you. Thank you for that. Chandrika, I'm aware of time. I feel like I could just talk to you all day. But I'm just wondering if you could briefly tell the audience a little bit about your PhD research on head and neck cancer and the personal story behind it, if you're comfortable with sharing that.
Absolutely. Yeah, so look, I feel really fortunate to be now heading into the third year of my PhD. And the topic is about understanding the psychosocial education and support needs of people diagnosed with head and neck cancer. So I went around and did interviews with patients, people who have this type of cancer. And it is, it's a difficult type of cancer. There's no easy cancer to have. They're all rubbish. But these ones are very visible. So this does speak to some of that body image stuff and the stigma that people face when they look different, when they have a visible difference. There's a lot that goes with that in terms of self-acceptance and in terms of the way people relate to them out in the world. It can be challenging. So that's what I've been investigating. I've interviewed a number of patients. I've interviewed also health professionals who work in this space. And the health professionals understand, and this is from all different disciplines, that it is a difficult cancer type. It's a difficult cancer type to treat because it has to be incredibly specifically targeted. Most of our sense organs are here in our head and neck. And so if you get the treatment wrong, you damage people's ability to speak, to eat and drink, to smell, to see, to hear. And so they understand that this is complex and sometimes confronting when people do have, the kinds of surgeries and treatments that are very disfiguring. So it wasn't part of my plan. I didn't choose the topic, actually. The topic was chosen and I was awarded a scholarship to do this work. And then about a year into it, I went to get my own skin cancers checked out. Actually, I knew that I had the skin cancers. What I did was I went to an ACT training, acceptance and commitment therapy training, that invited me to look at the things I was avoiding.
Wow. Okay.
And one of the things I was avoiding was going back to the dermatologist to get the next line of treatment for my own basal cell carcinomas. So the kind of little red skin cancers that almost everybody with fair skin in Australia and even with darker skin in Australia will get eventually. I've had lots of them. It's just bad luck and maybe other things as well, some triggers there, a bit too much sun exposure. So I went to the surgeon and they said, there's so many in your right cheek. Can't see where one ends and one begins. We think we're going to have to do something quite radical, which is to take a section of neck and replace your cheek. So to cut off the whole cheek and take a wedge of neck, muscle and tissue and turn that into a new cheek.
Oh my goodness.
So my first article for my PhD was about becoming an insider in research. When you go from having this separation between the researcher and the participants to suddenly being a lot closer to the participant experience.
Wow.
So that was good. And I called it the seer and the seen. And I used a bit of kind of yogic philosophy about, we're looking at each other, looking out. But actually we all live within ourselves as well. And to have that experience of being on the inside of that, you're not different. You're still yourself.
Yeah.
Everything that matters to you still matters to you. I'm probably lucky that I already didn't base my self-value on the way I look. I mean, it matters, but it doesn't matter that much.